Chapter 4. I had started again of it as being believing my own press. Again at a loss, seeing that starry gleam in the eyes of the audience of Valley Teeny Boppers, seeing rock star surfer dude bullshit. I'd found myself lost at last on that too delusional road of two-bit wannabes that infested the Lost Angels scene out in LA's scene, out in, out in, out in just breathing that rarefied air of a superstar like Jim Morrison awoke me to my mediocrity. The success ascendings out of my beginnings, that high standard I'd realized from ages 3 to 9, blew away illusions of such pretense now. The mad, dead dogs, failing a failure, kept growling, nipping at my numb nuts of a numb skull. Self-loathing, so familiar from my social disease, filled my inner sense like a cancerous lump. And now, knowing only that knot, entangling of it seemed to grow and spread over night or day to wise X. Now I knew only the open road, a wound that wound north along the mother waters. I'd left my board behind, as hitching with a hunk of fiberglass surfboard wasn't my notion of freedom on the road, but I'd no doubt pick up another somewhere down the line. Once you've lain in the waters of the magnitude, well, she keeps calling you back. Out in her eye, her eye, her eye. Out in the rush of it, then. The weight, the gloom of my state of mind seemed to lift like fog burning off when I jumped from a ride out on Coast Highway 1. That is, till the rain came in. Sometimes bad weather can be a boon for getting a ride, but this rain swept in with a blanket of fog, making me, standing still out there on the highway, feeling alone, nearly invisible. Plus, I'd done the last of my codeine and dexedrine. Even my caffeine levels were dangerously low. The rain and wind shredded my dignity, making me bawl like a baby. I cried. Cried for my mama and my daddy, the farm country, the horses on old man O'Malley's ranch, gold dust, the golden palomino mare with that hank of white hair that lay practically to her nose, my first love, even before Melinda, and I cried for her too. But the crashing waves now, from here a distant whispering, just kept taking it away until I was stripped of all connivance or contrivance, all pretense of my scheming and drugging. Meanwhile, traffic kept jetting sheets of water as it passed, jetting on by. You just keep hiking that road, letting the miles carry away the detritus of a memory. Me, my life in Lost Angels wasteland. I realized a hell of a lot of people live solid, blooming, bloody lives in that desert basin of stolen waters and stolen dreams. Yet solid, so solid, yet I was drawn to the gas of it. The surf pounding rock and boogie of it. The play you pay for it. What of it? Who is it? Is a soul worth the devil of it in the details? Lifting my head off that chest of sorrow, I took a good look around. To the east, foothills broke the incoming fog. The road ahead beginning to wind up in elevation. Youthful optimism rose with it, a natural vigor flowing up from genitals through spine into heart. Eyes blink. A vehicle pulls over. I feel rain dripping off my hair. Hey, you want a lift or what? A man calls after leaning over to roll down the passenger window. I nod with a tight smile. It feels as if the air of ocean rain has dissipated my solid state. It's a feeling, felt as being eye on eye as the electromagnetic waves. Me soaked to the bone. Material of wet fabric acts as if an insulating wrap, defining that plasmatic felt field body like a second skin, defensing my boundaries. Suddenly, aware the man wasn't going to wait all day, I'm finding myself frozen, motionless, invisibility so sure he'll drive off. He doesn't. Instead, he pushes open the passenger door, then does something truly remarkable. He gets out of the car, rain still sweeping in from the ocean. Coming around the front of it, he flashes a grin of brilliant white teeth set against a broad nose of burnished walnut-colored skin. Come on, my brother. Let me give you a lift, he says, walking over, gently prodding me to get in. Closing the door behind me, my savior sweeps back around to jump in behind the wheel. The heat blasting inside begins drying out the weight of my wet clothes, making me feel solid, warm again. Man, it's coming down out there. My name's Jamal, he says with that broad grin, his right hand extended, hands of a white-collar guy. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Page 78. Jamal asked as he put the car in gear, easing back on the highway. A gust of wind sent a curtain of rain across the hood, shuddering the car as it accelerated. T. Willie, brother. I'm a little Jones. Sorry y'all had to get out in that weather, I managed, feeling the echo of the voice and the sound of my words. Don't mind this fool, this indulgent idiot, it seemed to add. Been there, my man. T. Willie? What's the T for? Jamal asked, flipping the windshield wipers up a notch. Trick, I responded, well familiar with it by now, some 2+ years since it had slipped out of my mouth that fateful day on the beach meeting Bobby and Kamala. That T has too often been finding its way into my name ever since. As serendipitous as my life is, that T turned its way out to be the perennial opening for the voice. The voice, or any voice really, a trick of breath breathed, in out, in out, in out across stretched chords, vibrating tongue, undulating lips, caressing it, kissing it off as swords, cutting open air into meaningful bites, meaning it, mediating it, validating it for ourselves. Why, you or I as exiting itself now, superimposing a sound of itself, supernaturally as thoughts. A tricky business, a rope appearing as a snake, superimposed merely as felt to be there, constantly, compulsively reinforced by that familiar sound of our own voice, assumed now then to be who? That breath, universal, free of any identity beyond Atma. atmosphere enveloping, permeating, pervasive of everybody, yet playing a trick of sounding as if anybody in word, appearing out in word, at least for a while now, as it animates inanimate clay. It walks, it dances, it talks. On it goes, tricked into believing a mythos of birth, opening of the mouth, turning a primal well of it, wishing to learn, only to burn, to die under the spell, the trick of hearing ourselves, bipolarity, so positive of knowing the sound waves our eye body, every body, a being to wish, to perceive, to think of it ourselves, just us, in, out, in, out, in, out of time after time after time, at least till at last breath we slip off that heavy coat of clay, the trick, Ma's tricks, a matrix of Eva-rai body, a scant, skinny, thin king of a why, as though Eve, I wish, wishing to be whoever I may be, now, for whatever reason, a while. On and on it goes, that trick of merely perceiving perception, perceived to be it ourselves at least a while now. Invisible breath of it animating the inanimate visible clay of it. Why, we the people love so to talk, to hear the sound of our own voice, to hear it for ourselves. Matrix, matrix of Eve our body, at least for a while now. Inevitably, everyone asks what the T stands for. For that, I've developed different strategies for deflecting the words with clever, at least according to me anyway, clever repartee and verbiage of current slang. Then, after all, turning the trick already has a certain implication. Still, at that time, and with the enthusiasm of youth, I'd find myself turning lost in rap sessions of intense dialogue with complete strangers, rapping long before hip-hop made its debut on the music scene, meant to engage in conversation, so enthusiastic about the possibilities of it, what it is, who it is, why it is. The 60s were now passing, turning into the 70s. LSD blew the collective mind, opening doors of perception to perceive other possible interpretations of our time-space reality. Now, not only drugs such as LSD, but also mescaline, peyote, psychedelic shrooms, along with weed and opiates. From the East came other religions, other philosophies, other practices such as yoga. As an example of my predilection to dereliction at that age, I practiced yoga along with Marlboro Reds, in addition to an ever-turning carousel of drugs. That door as a way to alternative theology would stay open through the decade, but would slam shut in the 80s with the election of Ronnie Reagan. All the good-fearing people went back to church, fearful that their souls would be lost, God forbid, finding themselves free of religion or archaic beliefs. Trick, huh? So what's the trick? Jamal asked with a smile as he negotiated a stretch of hairpin curves. Well, it ain't me here now. I'm straight, I said, trying to be on the side of easy humor. L.A. years had attuned me to the sensibility of my gay brothers. Well, good for you, my drowned brother. So, you don't want to party in Santa Barbara with me tonight? Jamal asked with a sideways smile. No, I want to party in San Francisco. You ever been? I replied. Jamal wore large frame glasses that darkened as the storm passed into sunlight. Sorry, sugar man. I'm headed for San Luis Obispo, Jamal said, his interest in me quickly waning with my sexual status revealed. Hetero, the way I gotta go. Sorry, bro. Jamal was a clean dude with the right look for a pretty man that doesn't want to waste it on chicks. He dropped me outside Santa Barbara. There, half a dozen other hitchers waited, strung out, spaced out, all in a row along the highway. I watched his eyes scan the lineup. Nothing appealing. He drove off with a wave. Heading to the end of the line, I saw a tall dude sitting on a folding camp stool, blonde hair out to his shoulders, with a large backpack by his side. I shook out a Marlboro, offering one to the blonde man. He shook his head as I fired up. Where you headed? I asked, sucking smoke deep into my lungs. Oregon, he replied, jerking his head northward as he sized me up. His look of disdain said, fucking L.A. cowboys. He appeared as somebody who could probably run down a buck with a knife to butcher it up for breakfast. I gave him a flat smile, gazing down the row of hitchers. They seemed to grow increasingly sadly desperate as I peered down to the end of the line. By the time I looked up, a pickup truck pulled over just ahead of me. The blonde stood to heave his backpack into the truck bed, giving me some kind of ironic smile. He knew it would likely be a month before this bunch of desperados managed to find rides. Only then it would be my turn. The highway turned to 4 lanes at this point. Hard to pull down a rig accelerating to 75. It was when others in line started bumming cigarettes from me that I decided to mosey on, though I did manage to score half a Valium off one dude with a massive beak nose and bones poking out of his stained sweatshirt with the sleeves hacked off at the shoulders. Page 80. Guess I just needed now to walk about 100 miles in silence or not. The voice swirled about my subconscious thinking myself a memory of itself as thoughts that I had found to be me all along, thus in a way of itself calming as well as disturbing itself back down, compressed by the weight of waiting on it itself as if a coiled spring set to burst back up at any time of it now, not just us, as any voice so compelling as a compulsion for taking it so seriously that I burst out laughing like a madman, finding myself completely it. I had now completely lost my mind, till remembering not to forget that I am is in charged of itself. It now knowing itself, Eve, ever needing, wishing to enunciate within itself an unrelenting repetition of a constantly computing constant determination, terminating terminals as sendings out of itself, so positive of negative. But words only come to one distracted as thoughts, supernatural of it now, knowing out of itself, a denial, twisted into, twined as being a knot, entangled, ensnared, enslaved by desire of them, the memory of itself, alone, all alone with an endless road to carry my gaze. I could still in the inward waters of me mind, or why memory merely appearing, staring, gazing, witnessing it witnessed, wide open at both ends, at least until the Valium appeared to be kicking in or running out. That's the problem with drugs, as they steady be running out, running away from it. Either I had to get to a place to score some more, or just keep walking until my head clears out. I flashed on the tragic irony of getting what we want without wanting what we need, that we wish to die to get what we want, to be born, when what we need, freedom, we only wish to ignore, to know it all. So, walking for hours, I just let my gaze go, swiveling around until the horizon line, that imaginary image in our eye, a line between itself, as above, so below, seemed to oscillate in figure eights, infinity ascendings of itself, eternal, ever turning back on itself. Now it seems one cannot possess itself oneself, or be possessed by itself alone. That is the thing of it. The thinking of it is, by now, any or everybody of only who, what person that I am is a me or you now, knowing out of it a memory of it. Someone once accused me of promoting some Eastern stasis, yin yang. What could I say about it? It is nothing now but thinking alone opposes it. Bipolarity ends it, thus sends it now out only to oppose itself, as though endings created supernaturally, supersonic sendings, waves our eyes, as though, as thoughts projection of a while now of itself, still freestanding, indivisible, yet attention, binary, by now our eye, bipolarity of that eye on eye, zinging a plasmatic supercharged felt field of you as thought to be, conned by a wish to be now not you. Is space-time now a while static, stationary, a station or a place first, a person? Who is space opposed by time, stasis, as stagnation comes of it now pathologically, from knowing out of it denial, disillusionment, not enlightenment. Enlightened you are eyewitness, freed freeness, either way of doing or not doing, go now or stay not. Is doing or going now not easier without that worrying hook of a gain or loss of it? Someone once told me I didn't think I'd get old. Maybe it was true in the sense of realizing that I am a memory as being a person unborn that doesn't age. Thus, realizing that, I am enjoying suffering youth still, hoping to die young from my reckless ways. Of course, I was that grasshopper, fiddling while the ants lay up their stores, and of course, I might expect some of it for my singing. Whereas whoever not thinking of it, where here is only thought to be there. Somehow, somewhere, there is who ever thinking of it here as there. Clouds tear over low foothills, with acre after acre of vineyards rolling out to catch the sun's rays shafting through my tears. Watching as braceros here now prune last year's vines. I think of farmers back home in the Midwest, not on foot, riding tractors when in the fields. Here now they work, standing, walking on the earth, walking as cars race by, feeling the earth with every step. I found myself lost, wondering as if there was here any real purpose to it now. Why? Why now beyond the obvious as sex? Then I realized, such pondering, the privilege of a childless free white boy, footloose, fanciful, and generally lucky. Lucky enough to find myself lost chasing my tail, that tall tail of it out, in, out, in the eye of the beholder, holding on to it, still merely appearing, staring it, witnessing it a while now with time on my hands to contemplate my belly button, the source of it appearing in the first place, that source of everybody, that the thinking of it is all there is, was, and will be here now, knowing out of it to begin with as sendings out in her eye, waves as that. That is its purpose. Purpose of it freestanding, freeness, awareness, now to be aware of it still, motionless, more merely circumscribed by waves as circumstance of possibilities before Eve our eyes zinging it, a real eye zinging itself. So often towns have their outskirts of rail yards, rendering plants, warehouses, mechanic shops, refineries, etc. But this one coming up is Santa Barbara, one of the coastal crown jewels, first port in the storm from Los Angeles. As many towns or cities along the original Camino Real, the Real or Royal Highway, were Catholic missions, thus named after saints. This was a boon for the first European Christian missionaries coming to California, but a real bummer for the natives virtually enslaved often to death to build them. Now I'm hard-pressed to find any saintliness in all the busyness. The outskirts here of Santa Barbara are vineyards and wineries and multi-million-dollar custom estate homes. The busyness now to be cheap migrant labor doing all the sweaty hard work on land appropriated by more often than not, ill-gotten wealth for the sake of indulgence capitalized for hoarding more ill-gotten wealth. Of course, as in all these she resort and wine towns, there is the more interesting, seamier underbelly of those regular working folks employed to service the more privileged rich, or them just lucky enough to be here vacationing. These regular folks were my people, or at least those I'd been working with over the past 2+ years. I thought for a brief second of landing a gig in Santa Barbara, but my pulse beat for San Francisco, St. Francis, and the Golden Gate. Page 82. For several years I'd been hearing about the hippies in the Haight-Ashbury, their free markets, their free love, but most of all, free LSD. As fate would have it, my first day in town I encountered quite by happenstance the legendary Owsley, who blessed me with some of his separated white crystal LSD, even purer than the microdots the government issued. But then now I get ahead of myself, of indeed a linga, free of appendage that I. In other words, this tall tale of chasing tail is on, having now not ahead, behind, right or left, above or below, still headless invisibility now out in that memory as being ahead, over shoulders, shouldering it, invisibility. I often find myself lost, wandering of the power that be the establishment of intelligence community. JFK talked of its spreading influence, like a cancer, mutating an open, free society into a paranoid, militarized, industrialized national security state. He realized that night, taking a dose of LSD, Love's Doorway, the paradox of a body politic, CIA, responsible for its LSD's introduction. A beastly cancer, now CIA, inadvertently offering its own curative medicine, while at the same time growing itself out of control, spreading ever deeper into a body politic, still mirrored potential of itself. LSD, offering that potential for anybody to melt that black colorfully again, unto finding itself still, motionless, more of itself, indivisible, blissful invisibility, witnessing a psychedelic color fantasia, without forgetting ahead of itself. JFK went through that Love's Doorway that night in the white people's house. He went all the way through a portal of itself still, that first place where a sun or moon or star shine now not. Thus he showed his back to that community of spy versus spy, betraying them with his own venturing through Love's Doorway, a way into or out from itself, a way peacefully coexisting of it now as intelligence, thought, knowing denial of it to be not it. That way, Love's Doorway, against the very fiber and philosophy of the alien corporate militarized industrial establishment principles of alienation, conflict, or war as a way of progress. War, humankind's means of redemption. Payback, brother. As the saying goes, war is good business. Invest your sons and daughters. JFK had been christened at their altar a cold warrior, now not. Anyway, I like to think he'd already found his liberation weeks before Dallas. All they succeeded to do then, with his quasi-ritualistic murder, was create a martyr. As blowing out his brains, they splattered his sense of humor, humanity, and peaceful coexistence into the streets of an America now Nazified. The Nazis lost the war, but won the peace. They, having begun the transition to America, to America with a massive transfer of gold bullion to the U.S. even before the war in Europe ended. Nazi rocket and chemical engineers quickly followed in the wake of the marriage of the fledgling CIA with Gellenorg, the Nazi nest of spies, assassins, and death squads. With JFK out of the picture, LBJ Bell helicoptered us into invading ground troops in Vietnam. But now, man, the clouds are breaking up, and it's good to be alive, footloose, walking the California Coast Highway like padres of yore, even while other of my brothers, now not so lucky as me, pull triggers 10,000 miles to the west, blasting babies, burning hooches, bombing villages, exterminating the commie scourge. I catch a ride in an open bed of a pickup truck. Wind whips past me as the sun finishes drying my clothes. My back against the cab, I watch the road flowing back out from under a truck bed, so similar to that then passing overhead that first time now, opening high, awakening from invisibility out in, out in, out in Y as X, in sight of it as sex. Gulls and cormorants wheel over ocean's whitecaps, exploding off the rocky shore. I'm wondering now what the poor people are doing, the workers of the world. My heart lifts with the birds soaring over the treacherous sea cliffs. The beating of salt water on coarse rock could tear a man's clothes right off his back, should he be left caught unawares standing too close to the edge when an incoming wave leaps unexpectedly above and beyond any so-called safe distance. The sun, lowering on the horizon, casts hot orange light blobs on rippling waves as the pickup pulls over. Hopping out, I catch the waves roar, crashing distant, as the truck fades from sight, rolling on around the next curve ahead. Ironically, I find myself so happy to be alive at an intersection of the coast highway with Camino Los Muertos Indios, the way of dead Indians. The truck driver had told me of a grove of thousands of years old growth redwood trees only a dozen miles ahead. Watching the sun slowly edging toward a wide open ocean horizon, I determined to sleep under that canopy this evening. With a steady pace, ignoring passing vehicles, I make the grove as shadows deepen into an inky black. Occasional passing headlights reveal the giants stacked along a 2.5-mile wide corridor. The highway narrows to a tight, winding 2-lane roadway, threading through the grove with hardly a foot of shoulder at its edge. Sounds of passing traffic are quickly muffled as I get 50 or so yards in. Nothing but ferns and mushrooms can grow under the 200 or 300-foot canopy. Even the natives found these forests adverse to habitation. A man likely only passes through, spending a night or two before seeking open sky. Page 84. Firing up my last Marlboro, I stretch out on the thick bed of needles, gazing at the ember glowing at my fingertips. Beyond, the ancient ones stretch up hundreds of feet, virtually blanketing out the stars. Finding myself swept up in the centuries of their being here now, I drift off. I dream of Lord Death, a voice that's sounding without waves out in a horizon. Hurrah, hurrah. With my untimely near demise at the fearless age of 2 years young, I showed up unexpectedly at Lord Death's door. As chance would have it, he was now not at home. As one might imagine, he to be constantly busy. I found myself lost sitting in his parlor for 3 days and nights. Though this amount or degree of time now mere conjecture, as I can assure you, dear listener, in the domain of death's immortality, day and nights, only illusion of earth shadowing a sun shining perpetually, well beyond any meager concept of days, nights, weeks, months, years, decades, etc., etc. Even at 2, I wasn't bold enough to go snooping around Lord Death's crib, so I sat with the weight of waiting on death. Finally, he returned without any fanfare, as I recall. He was just there, sitting in his easy chair. As to who or what he appeared as, I imagine him taking any form as expected from any particular point of view of you or I, appearing itself at death's doorway. He looked at me, though I have now no idea who or what I may have appeared to be at that time now, still merely appearing, starring it, without knowing any appearing of it, with a piqued curiosity for a while before he spoke. "Yes, how long have you been here?" he asked without a sound, as in a dream. "I've been here, it seems like 3 days and 3 nights. One of the many fascinating aspects of my passing to the Almighty, the instantaneous capacity to recognize objects and speak coherently without sound, knowing out of it with a full vocabulary, filled a memory field of you or I appearing, staring it of itself. As being out in a dream of memory am I, that I of you, merely appearing, staring itself. Learned in words, earned to pay attention, felt, feeling of it alone, only as thoughts, or thoughts. That supernatural Lord, Death, spoke me in memory into appearing a second, a twin or two, twisting back around on itself. I learned instantly, earning enough to pay attention of it, that he spoke of it all alone, appearing out in languages, all appearing out in supernatural sound, vigorous waves without echo, as he's possibilities, a perk as being Lord of the word death. He also told me that as being Lord of the word death, he came to be actually an agency held for an agreed amount of time. That agreement, the ark, Death's Ark of the Covenant. When finished, he of his tenure would also pass on, though it seemed a bit vague as to who or where he or her here it would or could move. Does Lord Death, then, as a life experience a death of sorts? He snorted, saying it was usually he who did the talking silently. He could appear in any form, depending on what any person's karma wished for it to be. He said, since I had caught him out in compensation for his lack of hospitality, 3 wishes were to be granted me. Dead reckoning Lord Death seemed, as such, An errant genie trapped in some lamp lost to be found serendipitously out in the hinterland. I asked him, quite without thinking, if there was a heaven or hell. He replied there were 7 heavens and 7 hells. They were like vacation destinations where a being stayed temporarily terminated as long as their credit or debit held up. That was wish number 1. Number 2, I wished for my sister to be okay, remembering somehow without now then being aware of it, following her just before the delivery truck backed over me, concerned there might be repercussions for her apparent complicity in my near demise. I offered my second wish. Lord of the word death assured me she would likely be rewarded for her service in the execution of my karma. She had acted as a catalyst to activate my mission. Lord of the word death commented that people really get their heads turned around, so they now, out in living a life, do not realize what they think bad in their lives is actually the reverse. It's about redemption, not now of money, rather a mono-eye, freeness in plain sight, wherein adversity is more desirable, to slow down or halt all the tall tale chasing, offering a respite for realizing it is your own butt. More desirable than so-called good fortune, which only serves to perpetuate the chase, to pay attention so as to chase after it. He even mentioned JFK, probably reading my mind, saying an office holder like a president assumes a body that is amalgamated out of an entire notion of a nation. All citizens, upstanding or downright criminal, rich or poor, high or low down, are part of this his body politic. Periodically, an assassination is necessary to refresh or revitalize this body politic. The magnetism of the leader is realized, dying, dissipating back into the populace. The demos, wheel turning, burning, yearning, wishing to be born, to heeding death. Also typically the first becoming last when passing to the next incarnation, one life of it pouring back into itself. Number 3, remember the story. The guy, after blowing the first 2 wishes, realizes it is coming to be his last wish, realizing that it is that I am wishing for it to be, willing for it to realize itself, myself itself, aware now knowing out of it is a singularity, a singular it, not realizing you or I are I, still motionless, more it already right now, merely appearing, staring it only right now, left out of it as though as thought to be appearing, right now left out of it. Whether you or I know, deny it or not, it is all, then there is here now to it. The thing thinking of it is only who, now not known, by knowing out of it. No, knowing out of it, denying it as being of it. So, as you or I wish it to be, you or I will it either know or realize itself. Wishing for it now as though not to be you or I will it to be now not it, by all knowing, denying out of it. To realize that it is that which realized everything, every thinking of it is as itself reality. A reality why realized even as exiting it, leaving it alone even while living as though out of it a while now. Page 86. That is, that it is who is you are I, that I am. Then nothing, no thinking of it, knowing out of it, really denies or prevents you finding it for yourself. Thus, wishing for finding it out for myself, Lord Death looked at me with a short smile. What you wish is, how shall I say it, possibly impossible. Listen, I got some really cool stuff like celestial maidens whose music is pure ambrosia. They will take it to you as heavens of shimmering phantasmic colors, sounding out of it enchanting melodies laden with intoxicating aromas. I can send you to places where you can take it or leave it in any form. You can create and destroy your own worlds. As far as this knowledge of it, this realizing of it, Devatri Pi Vichikichina Pura, with regard to it, thus even the gods entertained doubt from days of yore. You see, my sonny boy, it is quite impossible to be without it, let alone a gain of it. Ever who, then, is what it is, a singularity. A singular it, why, or you, that you now cannot leave it alone, then you cannot now enter it as well to find a gain of it for yourself. So as you wish for it to be you, so you will it to realize itself alone as though as thought to be of it within or without you. He, Lord of the word death, had me there, yet somehow here I could not now leave it alone. Fools rush in, etc. Then with a raucous laugh, ha! That cleared his house. He sent me back out in that awareness that I am aware of it as the stare-eye story, to be wishing, to be willing for it as being continuation of it, continually continuing, finding a gain myself lost now, ab lack of it, knowing out of it in these words, that I am of it, you, or me now, reading, writing, or listening of or to it, a singular it, why, or you or I are I of that I am in war, a witnessing right now, left alone, knowing out of it a memory of this or that moment in word, in the sound, really any sound, is it as that Lord of the word death, as thoughts or thoughts, to be born to a life lived as them, the memory of them as me or you. Thus there then is here now just us, knowing out of it anything, any thinking of it, or nothing now, thinking of it as thoughts, being not it at last, or for the first time now, all alone. In other words, we owe our soul to the company stole. I responded with words I remember hearing somewhere on a phonograph. For though I may now wish to be willing it to leave me alone, there is here nothing for it to do but keep on, keeping on and on and on, out in, a hurrah, wave of it as possibly impossible to be without it. Then again of it alone is awareness of it, aware, freeness now, aware sun, 14 plus billion years, Y years listening, glistening, blitzing, 250,000 miles per hour with a moon or hyperstar shining million plus miles per hour, all shine not now as aware, free of it. To be still, motionless, more that individual invisibility of itself out invisibility, only appearing of it now a while, time, space, really a dang short while for anybody. Meanwhile, still in the first place as his house of Lord Death, I am here, hearing supersonically, silently, more of it as my third wish. To be willing it to realize itself, it seems, once made, must continue throughout my or any lifetime, whether I like it now or not. Thus, there is here nothing for it but to pay attention to it with a living wage, a living with age, simultaneously with dying to realize who it is that I am, ageless, unborn immortality. If that don't blow your mind, then try drugs, sex, and rock and roll, baby. According to LSD, anyone as being of it who wishing to be willing, for it pursues after either prosperity or immortality. That anyone of itself all the while now, appearing, staring, starring, it appears of it as two, as twelve, by that simple singular sense, we are I, being as tween, between a twin twist of fate, faith, family, engages out of it in that simple sense of duty in either the pleasurable as sex or the preferable why or you still. These two of a singular it, why now as ex-itting, leaving it, though related inward, relatively indivisible, only as out in word, thought to be as sword, slicing slices of it seem separately seeming twisted together right now, left knowing out of it as two, as two, twisted human goals. That is door number 2. Prosperity here and hereafter. Or that goal door number 1. Salvation or liberation of itself only as thought and word to be captive in word any old way. It right now left knowing out of it opposition. A position of I person, it now knowing itself into twisting itself into a knot, entangling of it a knot, entanglement now knowing out of itself supernaturally, a split second nature, a while now knowing out of it acknowledge, meant to fall for it, superimposing ignorance of itself, as by itself already to realize it, a singular it, why already, right now left the choice. Preferably embracement for it, or for the sake of opposing it by polarity, in pleasure or pain, wealth or poverty, birth or death, eros thanatos, ignore its indivisible invisibility, as though it is divided out in, her visibility. So, if I choose door number 1, I'm finished as T. Willie, I asked, suddenly feeling homesick. I'm only 2.5 of me. I wanted to live. Had the other half of me just wished for a premature death, I wondered? Then I gazed, radiantly as that radiance, the radiant Lord, the singular it, Y or U or I, R-I, of it merely appearing in. You will continue to be Willie, similar to an automobile with its motor turned off, coasting on the momentum of your accepted karma, the fruits of previous actions, lives, but you will awake on occasion to the reality, the real it, why, that I am. Lord now spoke of it. Page 88. Waking from the dream, I found myself in a morning mist enveloping the redwood grove. Shivering, standing up, I heard some vehicles passing on the nearby highway. Jogging in place for a few moments to get blood circulating, I started in that direction. Fragments of the dream lingering in my mind's eye, I walked quickly to the highway, bewildered and craving a cigarette. Traffic was light in the morning, but cars slowing to 20 miles per hour to pass through the grove helped me catch a ride in 20 minutes. At this rate, I figured to be in the city by noon. As luck would have it, I landed in the Haight-Ashbury just before dark. Expecting peace, love, and free drugs, I could not have been more perplexed by what met my gaze. Hiking a steep hill from Divisadero Avenue, I reached the iconic corner of Haight and Ashbury to find a burned-out storefront. A blackness of the char seemed to absorb the last falling light. Empty storefronts stood like missing teeth in the haggard smile of the shabby neighborhood. As light continued to fade, so did passers-by, with movement quickening. After about 6 blocks, I heard a muted scream coming from a darkened alcove of a movie theater. The vertical marquee of unlit bulbs spelled out its identity as the Straight. Straight in the Haight. Approaching the deep shadow of its entrance, I could begin to discern a couple grappling on the ground. The figure on top was tearing at clothes with one hand as it pushed the other's face down. Without really a thought, I reached out to jerk the assailant back by the collar of his jacket, body slamming him against the plywood covering the windows. Blood gushed from his nose as he went down in a heap. By this time, the victim got up. She pulled me by the arm till I found myself running with her down Haight Street, our shoes slapping the pavement. We rounded the corner to hustle up some stairs, climbing above a shadowed alley. At the top, she leaned into a weathered door the latch gave. We mounted a second set of stairs that led to a flat tar roof. Turning, she looked at me with wide, pale eyes, her finger to her lips. We waited, the silence broken by the wail of an approaching police car. Expecting it to stop, I listened to it buzzing down the street, its roof lights jetting off storefronts below. "That motherfucker! I'm going to rip his balls off," she said as the siren wail faded. "Are you okay? Do you know that guy?" I asked as she did a quick inventory of her attire. I'm going to find out who he is, and my old man will take care of him, she replied. Well, as long as you're okay. My name is T. Willie. I just got here from L.A., I said, offering a hand. She looked at it, then at me like she was seeing me for the first time. The hardness around her eyes and mouth softened as she looked shyly away. Oh, sorry, I'm Evelyn. I didn't thank you for saving me from a sore crotch back there. Gets so you can't even run and score a little dope without getting accosted. We sat in a mute silence for a spell. Some electric guitar music fell out from an apartment window above. A door slammed, someone yelling off a back porch. The guitar stopped momentarily, then another voice yelled from the window above. Evelyn signaled me with her eyes. We moved off back down the stairs to the alley. Stealthily, we crept back to the side street, looking both ways, then bolted up a hill for several blocks. Evelyn's hair streamed out behind her as she ran. Occasionally she glanced back over her shoulder at me. The shy face would appear, then she quickly looked away, dashing up another block. She made a right turn just as a streetcar rumbled past. Midway along the block, we ducked into the entrance of a 3-story apartment building. As she hit the apartment buzzer, I did a quick scan of the neighborhood. Down on the corner, the lights of a market glowed. Everything seemed quiet and normal. Hearing a stream of water hitting the pavement from a 2nd-story window, I glanced up to see a woman's pussy cheeks hanging over the windowsill. A steaming stream continued for several seconds. Just then, the front door buzzed and Evelyn yanked me in. We went up a dingy hallway to a 3rd-floor apartment. There she introduced me to her old man waiting at the open door. He had long, thick, wavy hair pulled back in a ponytail. Wearing tinted glasses, he looked at me with a crooked half-smile. "Did you get?" he asked, looking quizzically at me with that curious sort of smile. "I almost got raped, that is," she said, tears coming to her eyes. "This brother here pulled the scumbag off me before he could get his dick into my crotch." "So you didn't get the smoke?" he asked. "Waylon, you son of a bitch," she flashed. "Ah, kidding. You okay? So nothing happened?" he asked. Page 90. "Fuck you. Something happened. I got jerked to the stinking pavement with some slobbering dick brain all over me trying to stuff his lizard up my cunt. Or my ass." Finally, we got somewhat squared away. Waylon snaking his arm around my shoulder and thanking me profusely for saving his sweet sugar plum from the depravity that had fallen on the street called Love, Hate Street. Evelyn made tea as Waylon set to cleaning some weed pipes and seeds to scrape together a joint. He put together a couple of greasy numbers and opened a bottle of Rainier Ale, what he called Green Death. We set to commune with the spirits. "Yeah, I come out here from New York in 1966 with flowers in my hair. Man, the scene was incredible. Revolution was in the air that summer of love, 67. It didn't last long after that. The so-called groovy people went back to college or moved north across the bridge to Marin County. Another wave of migration hit. Some of these folks made Dust Bowl Okies look like aristocracy. Pretty soon the hippies turned to junkies. Bodies started turning up in shallow basement graves, property values plummet, then guess what? The mayor's daughter ends up buying up a bunch of property on the cheap. Now they got a program on to drive out the junkies and restore law and order. Does somebody start seeing this shit coming down or what?" On this note, Evelyn let out a snort. "Well, the program is just getting started. It'll take a few years to clean up this show. They already started installing these new shadowless streetlights, and we're seeing more patrol cars on Haight Street. It's got so you can hardly walk 5 blocks without some pig hassling you. If you try to act cool, they figure you're holding. And if you try to look normal, well, you'll stick out like spades on Valentine's Day. Wyly'em continued. Wyly'em was obviously a talker and a hustler. 2+ years working on the Sunset Strip in L.A. was as good an education in street smarts as a small-town Midwestern cracker like myself can hope to find. I'd seen them all: hustlers, beaters, deadheads, acid queens, coke tutors, and most of your run-of-the-mill druggies, but, like they say, it takes one to know one. Wyly'em seemed to possess facets of all the above, along with a certain messianic bent stimulated by copious use of psychedelics. The conversation quickly turned to that subject. It seems Wyly'em, being a long-term resident of the Haight, knows the best chemists. After a few more glasses of Green Death, along with burning the second joint, he offered to take me to a pad where I could meet some people. Evelyn came into the room in a bathrobe toweling her wet hair. She had a sweet face without makeup, pale skin, and a weak chin framed in long reddish hair that lapped against the back of her robe as she massaged the hair above her ears. She seemed sweet enough, even with a mouth that could make a longshoreman blush. But then again, she was hooked up with a scamp like Wyly'em, so the sweetness must be a cover for something more devious. I had a pretty good read on them, but still they were fun, and Wyly'em turned out to be true to his word. He knew some chemists. In fact, that very night, we set out to meet one. We talked, or I should say Wyly'em talked, some more, while Evelyn dressed in what one might call a style wherein the most is made of second-hand thrift store hip jeans, tight with numerous patches, so tight that several threatened to burst their stitches, offering to reveal a tease of lace panties covering a butt that actually best featured her short, compact legs. We hiked downhill for a few blocks, Wyly'em pointing out the spot where a police substation had been before some radicals blew it up. Those brothers are lying real low. Word is they were actually set up, like Oswald, as patsies. Set up to make it look like some serious shit coming down. A false flag terrorism where the government sets up an incident to justify an excess show of their own reign of terror. Now they can pull you right off the street, put you in front of a grand jury, no lawyers, threaten with doing a stretch in the pokey, you'll likely give up your own granny. God bless America, man, but watch your ass around here. One day you're here, and the next day. Wyly'em finished the sentence with an exaggerated shrug. This gesture I can still see many decades later. Maybe yes, maybe no. You know what I mean, brother, don't you? Paranoia strikes deep. Into your soul it will creep. Starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come, take you away. We go to a main drag where 2 boulevards split by a tree-lane panhandle lead into the lush growth of what I learn is Golden Gate Park. Streetlights blazing along the avenue contrasted with the purplish-black silhouette of the park, running, I'm told, 48 blocks to the Pacific Ocean. We crossed the panhandle and began climbing again. The funkiness of the Haight seemed to fall away as we entered a more upscale neighborhood, where you might die of boredom instead of drugs, or murder in the psychedelic bacchanal of Haight-Ashbury. Page 92. We came to this house facing the park that can only be described as a stately mansion with a facade of lacquered wooden pillars capped off with Corinthian crowns above a carved door lintel. Waylon tells me the most popular psychedelic band at the time, the Jefferson Airplane, owns it. So it's all high ceilings with soft polished floors well appointed with antiques of a rich hippie style. Not your day glow sprayed splash crowd. We were passing into a new decade, the 70s. The outlandish, outraged outlaw will be tamed by a meditative spiritual morality. While I'm not against morality, God knows best, my experience since arriving in the hate has given me a taste of raw immorality. Okay, so find me somewhere between self-righteous or self-deprecating, tilting more or less to the latter. Here in this spotless mansion, one could sense a certain settling in of the psychedelic revolution. Waylon told me the band themselves had fled the anguish of the city for the open country of Marin County Riche. We were now in some sort of headquarters, passing through, people congregating. Waylon caught the nod of several groupies as we ascended the stairs of some sort of upper sanctum. A conservatory of plants led to an open balcony looking out at the lights of the boulevard skirting Golden Gate Park. Two figures stood at the rail. One wore a long coat like a surgeon's, airbrushed with colorful array of exotic birds. The other man, dressed in a tailored three-piece suit of crushed velour, gestured with the intensity of an artist. Waylon walked on up like he owned the place. He started in right away with a slightly hyped version of Evelyn's recent exploits. Naturally, I was drawn into the conversation. The one in crushed velour turned to me. His eyes shone with a radiance as he spoke around a beaming smile. "That's a beautiful thing, brother, to help out a stranger like that," he said, reaching into his breast pocket to withdraw a pinky-sized glass bottle. He handed it to me with a broad grin. "Consider this as a reward from one stranger in appreciation of another, though we are all one soul," he added. Taking the vial, I held it up to the light. At first I thought it was empty, but then I noticed a layer of crystals at the bottom. Giving it a long look, I nodded one brother to another. Without saying another word, we went back to his conversation with the beard and the long coat. Waylon caught my eye with a gesture, and we went on back downstairs. It was only then I realized Evie, as I came to call her, had not come up with us. We found her downstairs in an animated conversation, waving a filter-tipped cigarette around. I overheard something like hanging somebody's balls from a wire as Waylon swept her away from the conversation. On the walk back to Waylon's pad, talk quickly turned to the contents of the glass bottle the stranger had bequeathed me. "You scored, my brother. That was the man, Albert Owsley himself. I've never met him, but Fees, the guy he was talking to, told me he was coming tonight," Waylon said, his whole body tensing like a coiled snake. A snake somehow is very much a metaphor for Waylon. He was the kind that slips inside you trying to squeeze a little out of a brother. But then, he'd never met anyone like me, though. He would later profess to be a realized master. Then I realized any true master of anything would never set him or herself up claiming to be one, but then some just gotta blow their own horn. I've learned if you say you know, most likely you don't know. But I was willing to humor the man as he had just connected me to the finest separated white crystal LSD on the planet. We hiked back to Waylon's crib where the crystal acid would keep us in a purple haze for a month. The crystal so pure that just a few microscopic grains collecting on the head of a pin, then immersed in a glass of water, took us to other dimensions. In between trips, we drank beer with tequila, smoking Colombian reefer to come down. Then we'd eat and sleep until ready for the next trip. Whenever we dropped, I generally managed to put some distance between Waylon and me when first coming onto the acid. I knew Wyly'em felt a little frustrated whenever he couldn't dominate my attention. After all, he said he'd read Zen koans at 8 years old, was well versed in Patanjali yoga and the Tao, throwing the I Ching religiously. Then, Wyly'em was a self-realized master, and at that time, I wasn't even sure what that meant. For me to reap the greatest benefits of the drug, LSD, I chose the inward path. Wyly'em, on the other hand, a child of the San Francisco acid tests, craved that attention where hundreds of people would dose in one group freak out of strobe lights, accompanied by live, loud, electric acid rock music. Whenever he tried to make an issue of it, I would simply give him one of his own impish shrugs. I preferred classical music on the rooftop, where sun, moon, and stars were my kind of crowd. Then he took it as a challenge to get deeper into what he called samadhi. Page 94. Samadhi, a Sanskrit word for a state of contemplated blissful oneness, a sameness. Familiar with yoga postures or asanas, he likes showing off his ability to twist his legs into the full lotus position of the Buddha. Power to manifest stuff, or the ability to have influence over others, was a priority with him. He constantly tried to exercise his power over Evelyn, but when it came down to it, I wasn't sure exactly who was dominating whom. In fact, he couldn't even get her to quit tobacco or her propensity to curse like a sailor when she got steamed. One thing Evie was good for, her ability to obtain the 5-finger discount. Give her some spare change for a couple of potatoes at the market and she would return with T-bone steaks, a bottle of wine, along with a box of brownie mix. She also made numerous runs to Wyly'em's weed connections, seemingly unfazed by her assault on the night of our first encounter. Sometimes I wondered if she was even baiting her assailant to make another attempt, only this time she ready with a small arsenal of mace, a 6-inch shiv, and a single-shot derringer. Wyly'em assured me that beneath that coarse exterior was a sweet Christian girl. Her father, he told me, was a Methodist minister. It had been a while since she'd run away from home at age 13. So the three of us cohabitated, but not for sex, as I quickly picked up on Wyly'em's possessiveness towards Evie. She had even offered to service me once when Wyly'em had gone to Marin across the Golden Gate Bridge for an afternoon to score some drugs. He seemed like the drug guru of the hate. He knew all the dealers. A cast of nefarious characters constantly streamed through with all manner of substances, from black balls of opium, Mexican brown, Colombian weed, coke, psychedelics, pharmaceuticals. It was a never-ending melange of intoxicants. His main man had a Marin mansion where Wyly'em was expected for a monthly re-up. I took a pass on Evie servicing me as the acid was countering my libido. Still, I had begun noticing a woman in a building across the back lots. She liked to lounge provocatively in black lace panties, returning my wave a few times. My general rule of thumb being don't mess with a brother's woman, especially since the sea is so full, like the woman across the way. Finally, the day came. I felt the need to get out beyond the rooftop. Deciding to see if I could hook up with the black lace panties, I hit on a strategy. By now I knew her schedule. Next time seeing her come in, I had a couple of sheets of cardboard and a marker. I wrote, "Can I come over?" and held it up to the window. She laughed while turning to find something. In a moment she held up a number. I slipped on my boots to head out to the street. When I knocked on her door, she answered, sporting only a braless tank top and the familiar black panties. Managing only a brief glance at her attire, I found myself lost in a pair of hypnotic green eyes. Eyes radiant with an intelligence that reminded me of Mary Meyer. Her name, in fact, was Mary Ann. She had an engaging smile that enticed me to go along with the eyes. It was an instant connection that sent my mind streaming as if on some neuronic highway at warp speed. She invited me in for a cup of tea. While sitting at the table, sipping tea, I watched transfixed as she cavorted in those black panties. Actually, she just went through the normal moves, putting some goodies on a plate. She moved about on the legs of a dancer, short and stocky, that seemed like coiled springs. Energetic in mind as well, she talked straight away about a method of its control that she practiced. She seemed as intrigued with me as I with her. Though no longer the virgin meeting Mary Meyer, I must confess my relations with the opposite sex had been primarily just that, about that. That in itself seemed torrid enough that I had never actually found myself as in the mind of that sacred feminine. Telling her straight out I was an acid freak, not recreational but major R&D, she laughed. I liked that she had that sense of humor so sparkling in her eyes. Pretty soon we're in bed to discover that my libido wasn't gone, only lurking in the shadows. So we got it on physically, mentally, and spiritually. She convinced me to soften up, practicing some drugless mind control. Over the next few days, she taught me the basics of the technique as we worked out in our mutual attraction. At any rate, she was such a sweetheart, such a pure soul. Comparatively, sure, I was a bit of a grumpy butthole coming down off the drugs and alcohol. Now drawn into her magical sphere of the sacred feminine, I would embark on a journey inward, knowing the mind or why or you or I witness ourselves in time as a while, duplicated as being twin twisted into appearing out in memory. A memory, awareness. Why, now to be as expanding consciousness aware in alpha waves are I, anybody appearing in now. The why or you or I appear as though as thought, less or more to be appearing out in the first place, still motionless or more indivisible, invisibility, individual, now out in, invisibility. In other words, alpha memory awareness, merely aware of itself, free of thought, thinking of itself, information felt, in touch with itself psychosomatically, to be now knowing out of it anybody, to wish, to be willing, still as singular a why, now as exiting. Page 96. Leaving itself, ourselves, a while now out in supernatural ways, superimpose sacred feminine field of view of you or me, everybody's memory of it, memory of mind or why now out in control of itself, even now as in a while of duplicating itself inward out inward, itself why now as X. What a rush. Without drugs produced outside of its own inward laboratory. Thus anybody wishing to be willing to realize it may find themselves, Eva-I body in alpha waves awareness, merely that. Aware that I am alone, appearing, staring, starring itself, still motionless, more indivisible, invisibility. Mary Ann taught me a method of setting up my own inward lab, capable of producing drugs far beyond Housley's fantastic separated white crystals of LSD. Oh, baby cakes, she had me. Memory of itself deep in her spell. spelling out of itself inward in that word so deep that even as sexual we are I-membered merging without coming to an orgasm. In tantric rapture of Kama Sutra union, where therein finding that love supreme consciousness of indivisible invisibility, finding itself free awareness now to be anything, any thinking, felt, feeling, psychosomatically of itself, herself, or myself, purely alphabetic waves, inward, out, inward memory of infinite potential. A memory in alpha beta brain waves, now a while, able to our I call of itself what Marianne called the awakened mind. Or why actually combine the full spectrum of alpha, beta, gamma, theta, and delta brain waves? In a waves are I mystery, mastery of that mean medium of that I am meant as being able to be in a state of consciousness of our choice at any given time. In that practice, I recognize myself as anyone, Y, or Eve or I, one, singular, it, Y, or you or I, prior to falling, failing completely under the spell, understanding, spelling, letter all E of alpha beta. A10 binary by now our I, our time, or after seeing as looking at it as being yourself, now projected consciousness now to be conned, mirrored knowing out of itself as yourself in words like eyes, nose, ears, mouth, hair, etc., etc. Once that spell sets in, it's as though supernaturally, as thoughts, felt, feelings being in or out of touch with itself, superimposed superficially, covering you or me for life till death. You alone, paying attention to it only with words spoken, heard, or read out loud now, or not in a her eye of waves, our eye body. Everybody, a plasmatic, psychosomatic body of awareness of it. Why are you now to be molded a while as though, as thought less to be functioning out, more in a duplicity of infinite potential diversity of it, yet a singular it? Why are you always free of it as awareness of itself, neither actually entering or as exiting itself, never leaving itself alone? As this awakened mind, or why memory she called yogi mind, laughing when I told her of Wyly'em's seeming pretense of being a sort of drugged up yogi master, she said we were actually being bogies, that in Sanskrit boga is pleasure, whereas yogis are ascetics, bogies are pleasure seekers. She had Wyly'em and myself, for that matter, dead to right on. As a matter of fact, her talking of pleasure seeking caught me craving a cigarette, which led my mind to alcohol, which led to drugs, and on into the night or day, do I as exhale. Chapter 5. We decided to take a little trip for a little change of scene. She had a 4-year-old Mustang convertible. We gassed it up, heading south for Mexico. Over the years I lived in Southern California, I became acquainted with many Mexicans. The majority I met, it seemed, had crossed the border illegally one way or another. One told me they called the U.S. El Otro Lado, the other side, like some separate reality. In the Haight-Ashbury, with the help of the ultra-pure Osley acid, I had visited what I thought of as the other side, a psychedelic landscape of altered consciousness, multi-hued crystalline forms in an evanescent panorama of color ranges on the very periphery of electromagnetic spectrum in visibility wavelengths, as being color unsullied by our earth-toning atmosphere. Atmosphere. Now Marianne teaching me some Sanskrit introduced in word and inward finding of creation, inward as Lord's body, thoughts, felt, feeling, projecting, knowing of you out in word as sound, vigorous waves, sacred feminine, Ma's possible potential, information, a while now space-time. For that one, not merely observing it while in states of ecstasy, but felt, feeling, melting down to itself, black into a blissful, unmanifest unconsciousness, now to be a zany creation, yet as being creator of it, who knows it is itself the very same, someone, some of one singular, it why as the sustainer, destroyer of itself. A being still in the first place, first a person now, inward, supernatural Lord, thought to be of it, superimposed on it of the word, neither either born or dying as two between realizing or knowing out of itself, twisting and not entangled of itself, as being reality of it, a real it. Why is it all along the while? Now then, it was not so clear to me 50-odd years ago. Lord of the word death awoke me, yet life put me back to sleep, as though as thought to be out of it. Somehow I found myself now knowing out of it a gain of a lost, running against the grain, coming where most were going where most were coming. Marianne sensed something. As we zipped along Highway 1, top down, wind tearing through our hair, open road, I could feel her probing with her mind. Ripping along, I was perfectly content to silently suffer my drug, tobacco, and alcohol withdrawals. Page 98. The road found me as I found the road to be my tonic. The movement, a memory of it still as though out in it. Emotional as waves felt, distracting itself out in alpha-beta memory. Distraction from the imminent stasis stagnation of a life lived as it opposed to itself now, knowing out of itself in denial, a while denied, bored out, leaving only that thin king of itself now, a superficial veneer, living on the fringe of a personality. Why not me or you, a memory, bored, broken, besieged, conned, as we poured back over some of the same highway I had so recently traversed. This included the ancient redwood grove with its trees originally sprouting with Caesars of Rome, the great mother tree at 5,000 years old as the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid. Instinctively, Marianne pulled over, got out, and started walking into the grove. It's like looking at stars so vast out in space-time they seem to disappear, she said, turning around and around with arms straight out at her sides, closing her eyes, turning until pulling up short before losing her balance. She laughed. Then now, spinning some more, she danced further into the grove. I trailed along behind, Without the swift movement back on the ground in slow motion, I began to crave alcohol. My mood slipped down as hers elevated. I want to do some readings here, as psychic vibrations here are so powerful to be pulsing through me. Give me a minute, then give me some names, she said, screwing herself into a seated position of only half lotus. Obviously, she wasn't as evolved as Wyly'Em, I thought with a grin. Having already tested her psychic prowess to read or visualize people now not present several times earlier, I had already in mind a few names of former acquaintances. She now as then nailed everyone with both physical and mental characteristics, voicing them out loud as I took notes. She called it trying on heads. Giving her a name, age, plus location stimulated a response that I realized as activated by my own memory imaging of that said person. Yet, setting up a mental lab allowed this imaging to expand in hers as well as now my memory field. Once asking me to try on a head, I replied as being interested in only one, that of who it is. Staring back at me then as now, her only response being, I knew it once we met. In my memory lab, constructed metaphorically internally as per her instruction, I had assembled a transducer, a device devised mentally to transfer internal dialogue of the voice via a dialectic technique for speaking of itself in ward, revealed to be now, even now, while living, as though as thought to be out of it by itself in word. Eventually, in any speaking tongues out loud in a common language, itself already in any or everybody then now, already right now left to choose to be willing of it realizing itself or continue as being willing of it only knowing out of it a denial, denying itself. This as it turning, twisting into tween of itself or ourself, just us in time, turned out of itself. That metaphoric device would take some decades from now, as then it, as that I am still now, as we all will turn to turning out of it heavily under the influence of a karmic destiny, need to instill it, indulgence of it, indulge in my memory, own it, while now out in denial of it. Yet internally that transducer began to humming out in that psychic Psi whole and alpha beta field where any inward boundaries are purely as thoughts or feelings felt out in touch or out of touch with itself, now knowing, no winging, projecting bipolarity, ascendings, metaphoric inward defenses. Offenses as thoughts, supernaturally separating it, a now indivisible, invisibility field of you or me, memory of it, out of it, as though superimposed in visibility. Thus, memory of it is mere supernatural eye on eye zinging electromagnetic plasmatic potential waves as it to be molded superficially a while now, space-time, a singularity, a singular it, why not as X? Why as X? Why it can seem so superficial as X sitting itself as being merely mirrored mirth, laughing out loud only a while now, a while a duplicity, deceit of it mirroring itself, supernaturally superimposing itself now over, covering, coveting, converting everybody in a my, me, or you memory of itself. It never possesses nor is possessed by itself as being indivisible, invisibility by itself alone, as being still in out of it all along, thus me or my shorthand for memory slash mind or why now knowing denying itself as X, y'all, attention of intention. A10, binary bipolarity, that supernatural electromagnetism, as sending so dang positive, negating Eva body, as being consciousness now to be desiring Ma's possibilities, as X, y'all. Sexual, we all a Mas, mess of it now, Mas, desiring her in itself as possibility to mirror itself as a hermit, hidden out in plain sight of a naked now as though clothed singularity, as a blackness now to be a gain. Wow, why not now? Get it? It laughed itself out loud through my memory of vocal cords, as it could appear only to disappear, simply disappearing black into a clothed singularity, singular it, why not now? Thus any dialogue becomes transferred through that metaphoric transducer as dialectic technique of automatic revelation, revealing of itself alone, y'all out of it alone, instill it as X, y'all, feeling it consciously as the conscious transmissions of psychic energy from one head to another. Marianne embodied a naturally sympathetic healing nature. Thinking of her, I found as thoughts of myself, thinking out of it possibly a psychic healer. But right now, I wanted a cold beer with a shot of whiskey.